What's up beautiful people, and welcome back to another brand new video in my channel Abhi's Photography. So in this video I'll be talking about some of the camera basics. So let's talk about shutter speed, aperture and ISO. All the three things you need to know how to use without even thinking about it if you're doing photography, and all these three things complement each other perfectly. So these three are the main components of the exposure triangle, which I will be talking about later. So let's start with shutter speed. You might have seen light trails or some movements captured at the perfect time, such as bursting of a balloon full of waters. So these are all done with the knowledge of shutter speed. So first we need to know what is shutter speed. So shutter speed is the amount of time for which the shutter of your camera opens for the light to enter and hit the camera sensor. And the side effect of the shutter speed is motion blur. I can keep a high shutter speed to freeze the image, but the image will be a bit dark. I can also keep the shutter speed low, for which the image will be very bright, but the image will be blurry. Shutter speed is expressed in terms of second, or we can say in fraction of seconds, such as 1/10 of a second or 1/100th of a second. And you have to remember that 1/100th of a second is greater than 1/10 of a second. So what do we get from this? We have to see the greater the denominator, the faster will be the shutter speed. So let's move to the second point, that is aperture. So what is an aperture? So aperture basically refers to the opening of the lens through which light enters, and it is represented as f-stops, and generally with the numbers such as 1.4, 2, 2.8, 4, 5.6 and so on. We have to always keep in mind that lower the f-stop number, wider will be the opening of the lens. So lower the f-stop number, the more will be the exposure and the greater will be the aperture. In the same way, if the f-stop number is high, the exposure will be low and the aperture will be smaller. It may look contradictory at first, but it will soon get clear when you will take pictures at different f-stop numbers. So till now we have learned what is an aperture, and now we need to know what is the work of aperture, or how does an aperture affect a photo. Aperture affects the depth of field of a photo. And now what is depth of field? Depth of field is the zone of acceptable sharpness in front and behind the subject on which the lens is focused, or simply we can say how sharp or how blurry this background of the subject will be. So in the end we have to remember that lower f-stops gives a more blurrier image than a higher f-stop. So if the f-stop is 1.4, the background will be more blurry than f2.8 or f4, f5.6. So let's come to the last point, that is ISO. So what do you mean by ISO? ISO is basically the sensitivity of your image sensor of your camera. Now what does the sensitivity mean? Suppose you are shooting in a low light situation, then the sensitivity of your image sensor must be high, that is the ISO must be high. In our camera, ISOs are represented as numbers such as 100, 200, 400, 800 and so on. As I said, increasing the ISO means increasing the sensitivity of your image sensor, and in that situation the light that will be required will be low. But you have to remember that ISO also controls the image quality. That is, an higher ISO gives a noisy image, whereas a photo with a low ISO will give a sharper image.